So we're going to get started in just about a minute with our speakers, but I wanted to welcome you here. My name is Paula Wishart. I work here at Rackham in professional development for graduate students. And so we are teaming with the School of Public Health and with the International Center as a part of the International Career Pathways series. You might have seen others. I've sent you information on this. You might have gotten it other ways given your interest. So we are happy to be here today to talk to you about internships. And it's a broad topic because we have lots of different students here and we have lots of different representatives. So we're going to talk about things specifically and then sort of raise up to broad practices and strategies that we recommend graduate students think about. So given that structure, what we're going to do for the first hour will be presenting and talking about the ideas. There'll certainly be time for you to ask questions. But then we're toward the end, right around 5 o'clock, we're going to end the formal part and allow you to have individual conversations with people if you'd like. So that way you can go to the specific person and allow our speakers time to answer questions without having to stay until 6:30 in the evening. So we will get started, and we will go down each person first to present sort of an introduction, and then we'll open the floor for questions. So Luciana, I'm going to invite you to start, and they will introduce who they are and what their program is.
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Luciana Inoshwaye. I am a PhD candidate in anthropology and history. I'm defending soon. And I had 2 internships while I was a graduate student here. One was with a small human rights organization, an NGO in the city where I did my fieldwork. And the other one was a regional museum, which was a history and archaeology museum in the same region where the city is located. And my research is actually about the transformation of this particular city in Romania from a factory town, a socialist factory town, to a tourist attraction. So, is that it? Yes. Okay. For now.
Then you can do
the whole introduction.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first internship I had was with, like I said, with a small NGO, human rights, and I was it was actually my way of entering the field work and doing research. And I wanted to ground it in some kind of organization. I didn't want to just go into the city and just ask people questions. So I emailed, I found a whole bunch of human rights organizations in the in the town, and I emailed all of them, and one of them was really interested to have me on board. So what I did was basically emailed them and said, I'm really interested in working in this city, and I'm really interested in your work with human rights. And if I could help in any way, I'm a grad student, I have these particular skills, I can help with, community organizing, all kinds of stuff. So they were super excited, they emailed me back, and it was kind of an informal, I'm gonna go here and work with these people. And then the Center for Russian and Eastern European Studies actually funded me to go for the summer. And I continue to work with them till this day in all kinds of capacities. And then my second internship was actually a little bit more formal because the Museum Studies graduate certificate program, that I got a graduate certificate here in Museum Studies, and they required you to have an internship. So because I still wanted to do research in this particular town in Romania, I contacted the librarian at the museum, who was like also their outreach person, and I asked them if they have internships, and they told me they don't, but they're happy to make up one for me. So I had to work with Museum Studies program here and their requirements for what counted as an internship, and the museum for what they wanted in a, what they could gain from me and my skills that I had gained in the museum program. And so we made it up, we made a contract, we signed it, we made it like a formal partnership, and then I went there and worked for them for almost a year.
Hey, Luciana. I don't know if my mic is on. One thing I want to just note, and we can talk about it later, is Luciana did a lot of identifying opportunities for herself and then formalizing them afterwards, which I think is a really important part, thinking about research in a context of an internship, or internship in the context of research. So, thank you. And before I let you go, in just a moment, I will pass them out, or if someone who's, I don't know if anyone's up there from our group, if you could build, there are sheets there that have everybody's name and program on them, and I know because the room is set up the way it is, you may or may not have gotten one, so I just want to make sure that you know, then you'll know who's speaking. With that, I'll let you know.
Hello, this is Honuka from South Korea, and I'm doing a dual degree with public policy and applied economics in Gerald Ford School. And during this past summer, I did an internship at the United Nations Economic Commission in Brazil. And now I'm currently doing internship at the district mayor's office in the finance office. But Stuart is kind of the international experience to me, but it's not for you guys. So I'm not gonna mention about the two things today. So what I did in United Nations was, usually the interns in the international organization, they usually help the administration job or help the kind of the regular staff members, but I think I was lucky, so I carried out my independent research about the large scale of the public investment and its effects on the country's economy. So how I get my job, like United Nations, was usually the people get the internship opportunity throughout the recruiting website. So United Nations has your UN Korea website, and then but it's very competitive. So it's at least like people around me, no one has kind of the UN like internship opportunity throughout this website. Instead, they use the personal connection or graduate career office in your department and throughout your colleagues actually. But my case was like very different. I sent many of the kind of the UN office email with my CV and my interest, and then in the email I explained them what I can do for them. So luckily I got the response from one of the office, which is from Brazil, and then we did the interview and I accepted the offer. So yeah, but when you guys apply for the UN job, you guys need to keep in mind several things. The first thing is the minimum requirement is the graduate student. So either master student or PhD student. And actually, among interns, there are many people having a couple years of work experience. So it's very comparative. And also, it's unpaid. So I didn't like it, but yeah, so that's why if you get an internship opportunity from international organization, you have to find the funding, because otherwise flight and accommodation and everything should be very expensive. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful, thank you. And I'm going to keep bringing themes up, so pardon my desire to do that. One of the things that I want to bring up, because I've worked with graduate students for many years, is the idea that identifying, both Luciana and Nook said this, identifying what you can do for an office, because I think that often there's this assumption my CV or my resume will speak for itself, and so identifying what you can do, what you want to do, helps the site have a better sense of how they might engage you. So that was a theme across both of yours. Sasha, feel free.
Hi, I'm Sasha. I'm in the Center for Russian, East European, and Eurasian Studies, and I was interning at the Adam Mickiewicz Institute in Warsaw. Personally, I'm actually going into human rights, so my internship wasn't quite related to what I want to go into, but I'll get to that a little more later. I was in a weird position because I'm in a 5-year program where I continued from undergrad into a 5th year of grad school, but my senior year counted for my first year. But that meant that the university was sort of considering me an undergraduate, sort of considering me a graduate student, so a lot of the university's opportunities are geared towards undergrads through their junior year. And I had to sort of figure out how to get a graduate internship while having this weird standing. So I looked at a lot of places by myself, looked at a lot of local human rights organizations, and finally in about January, the Weiser Center emailed us about a human rights opportunity in Croatia. And I applied to that. It turned out that I actually couldn't do the internship because I didn't speak Croatian, and they worked with me to place me at the Mickiewicz Institute. Again, it's not quite my field, but I figured out a way that I could work with it to make it more human rights oriented. My internship was writing about arts and culture in Poland, but I sort of tailored it to be more of a cross-cultural experience, which I find is really important when looking at human rights. So from my experience, I guess I sort of have 3 pieces of advice. One is to start early and to apply to a lot of places. Apply to as many as you can. You'll never know what will stick and what won't. Also, you're going to have to go through a lot of the bureaucratic nightmare of like maybe visas, maybe just health insurance and plane tickets, and you'll think you'll have all this time, but in the end you're going to be leaving in like 2 weeks and still have stuff to do. Always go to UMich as a resource. I went through the Weiser Center. They helped fund me. It was really the only way I could have gone on this internship because I couldn't get funding myself. Just ask your departments. They have more resources than they may seem to have. And also branch out. Like even if you can't find the perfect internship, there are internships that will work for you.
Thank you. You gave great advice on that. And not now, but I'd love to hear more about identifying university offices, because we have a lot of people who can speak to that. Thank you, Sasha. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frank Sidlar. I just graduated in May from the Department of Civil Engineering with a master's degree. And in November, I'll be moving to Jakarta, Indonesia with a Fulbright Fellowship. So my internship began 2 years ago in Jakarta, and it materialized through a travel studio over the summer through the department or the College of Architecture here in Michigan. And that was a 2-week program in Jakarta. And during that time, as I think would happen with most internships, you come in contact with a lot of other researchers and a lot of other people working in the area. And so arriving back in Michigan, I basically stayed in touch with all these people and a lot of emails back and forth. Not so much about future internships or future work, but just trying to stay in touch and get my name out there. And so the following 2 summers then, I basically continued with this the same organization that I came in contact with my first time in Jakarta. And this is a group called PETA Jakarta, and they're looking at ways to reduce the flooding in Indonesia with basically non-conventional sources of data. So using social media or flying drones over to Jakarta to find this data. And so over the course of these 2 internships that I had over the summers, there was kind of 2 big things that I think really allowed for this to happen. The first was when I came back to Michigan after my first time in Indonesia, I quickly realized the language was a big boost. And so I enrolled in Indonesian language for 2 years. Of course, I realized this isn't quite possible for everyone to suddenly take the language, but that not only opened up a lot of more funding opportunities for future work in Indonesia, but it also, on the applications, seemed to give me kind of a leg up, right? Because you're showing that you're committed to not only the culture, but the language, and really investing some time into working long-term in the area. And so that, I think, helped with the applications and the work on a lot of the internships there. The other one comes down to funding. So the second 2 times I went to Indonesia, people were certainly very happy to work with me and open to the ideas and the skills I could bring to the table, but it would always come down to, okay, this sounds great, what's the funding like? And for the most part, what I found in Indonesia was that there was no funded internships. Luckily, though, Michigan is ripe with funding sources, and so my background department was civil engineering, but over the course of those 2 years, I've gotten grants from the International Institute, the College of Engineering, the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, and even through the Center for the Education of Women. Just kind of showing that, don't be afraid to really branch out from your department and look for ways to apply your research or your work across a broad range of spectrums, as there's quite a bit of money available here at Michigan. A lot of these grants I would be the only, or maybe one of 2 people to apply for. And so the fact that if you can send an email to a group or an internship you're looking to apply for and say, I have the funding already, they'll be happy to talk shop with you. And the final thing is that and I think this goes for a lot of the themes here at Michigan, is that there's always someone from Michigan who's kind of done what you've done or is in the area, right? It's amazing to me, even in Jakarta, how many Go Blue shirts I see or Michigan hats. And you know, I'm not sure the exact resources within each department, but I'm sure there's ways to get in touch with these alumni or even people that had internships in these areas prior. I know one really solid source of funding that I got through the International Institute Individual Fellowship actually has a list of about the past decade of recipients of this work and where they worked specifically, what group they worked with. And chances are there'll be some overlap there. So summarizing really, if you can stay in touch with alumni or get some kind of connection, try and get funding before you go, and realizing that when you're filling in these budgets, you're not going to know every last detail, and that's okay. And then this worked for me well, but again, that may be possible with everyone, is try and invest or try and take some language or I guess area studies courses, because that really not only expands your own horizon, but shows that you're committed when you're applying for funding or to other organizations.
Both of you brought up the theme that getting out of your own department or really engaging the university as a total is really, really important. And we have some key people in the room who can talk about that too, but to be creative and be open to things that you wouldn't anticipate out of resources. So thank you.
Hey, I'm Breland Jones. I'm actually out of school. I graduated this past May from the School of Natural Resources and Environmental Engineering with a master's. And my internship was in Liberia for the 2 summers between 2012 and 2013. For the first summer, I was in charge of kind of doing logistics and coordinating kind of a STEM camp for high school and college students in kind of the heart of the country. And the following year, actually, I was kind of recommended to direct the program. And yeah, so I guess I started out doing work with, I came to Michigan wanting to do something internationally, and that was kind of what drove me to get involved in a student group. So that's essentially how I found this connection, is getting involved in a student group. And the first person I met that I went to a meeting, and I've been working with him ever since. I graduated doing research with him in Liberia, and he had led this program in the years prior to when I was starting to get involved. So he kind of essentially, I worked with him, and he asked, would you want to be involved in this? And I said, absolutely. I think everyone has said this so far, is it wasn't what I thought I would be doing for the summer exactly in terms of what I wanted to do or get out of it, but it was probably the best experience of my life that I've had. So when you see something that doesn't necessarily fit every check on your list, don't be afraid to just do it anyways, because that's how awesome things happen. And I think in terms of, like everyone else said, I hate being last because everyone already said it. But
You can answer your question.
yeah, so yeah, making the connections with Michigan folks, that's how I got this position. That's how I got the position I'm in right now. You know, there's people everywhere that are Go Blue. So you pick that up and you'll do well. I think another thing is express your interest. So I think I made the assumption when I first got here that people will know what I want to do without me telling them exactly what I want to do. And that's not necessarily the case. So kind of go after it when you know what you want to do and narrow it down. Don't be afraid to ask questions and seek out professors, faculty, postdocs, staff who lead these trips. There's a lot of staff that actually go on international trips for GIE programs. It's an undergraduate program that lead these trips in international settings. So there's so many resources, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second, that I didn't realize that were here until kind of it was too late. But it's good that you guys are here now to learn more about those. So.
It'd be fun to hear more about why it was so awesome, because I think one of the things we're trying to encourage is becoming more internationally involved and becoming more global, and so that's why there's a whole International Career Pathway series to help you do that. So it'd be interesting to hear more about that in just a bit. We're very happy to have Chineri on the panel, who is a university staff member who's a director of programs in the School of Public Health, Office of Global Public Health, to give her insights.
Thank you. So I didn't have to introduce myself. First of all, I want to congratulate you all for being here. This university has so many resources and so often they're underutilized. There's about 150 empty seats here where students could be hearing the same information that you're hearing. So I'm just happy to see you here taking advantage of these resources. I was at the International Institute today. They had their first ever open house, and I sat in the session on graduate funding opportunities, and I mean, there's money everywhere. So take advantage of that. I really enjoyed listening to these young people talk about their internship experiences, because if I were putting together a list of things to think about, everything that they said would be on the list. I have been to, I've worked kind of in global health for about 18 years, all here at the University of Michigan, and I can't tell you how many places I've gone where they've shown me a shelf full of reports that were created by researchers who came and researched something that didn't really matter to them. So the fact that everyone here went to a community looking to do something that would be helpful to that community, I think is incredibly important. If you intend to work in any kind of global field, maybe with the exception of business, but I won't speak on that because I don't know much about it, you have to be interested in working with that community. I mean, everything that we do as a university internationally is designed to build capacity and help, the people on the other end be able to do whatever they're doing better. And we have a reputation for that. I've gone places where they've said that, that Michigan's a good partner. So when you go out and you look for an opportunity where you have something to offer, that's very, very important. But also, like some people said, it's not always the experience you expect, but doesn't mean it's not going to be useful, because whatever you're doing, I mean, it's attitude. If you go and say, look, it's not what I expected, but I can get something out of this, then you'll get something out of it, and that's very important. I mean, really, these young people have said most of the things that I would have wanted to say. Look for something where you have something to give, but also something to learn. It's just like a job. You don't want a job where you know everything, because you can't grow. So you're still a student, so you can expect to learn something as well as give something. I'd also like to say, and this is a little slightly off the topic, I've been in situations where students got an internship in some country and they get a map out and they look at the map and they think of all the countries surrounding them. Oh, I'm going to go there the first weekend and there the second weekend. Collecting basically visa stamps in their passport. Spend time in the country you go to and learn something about that place. There's very little that you can learn even in 10 or 12 weeks somewhere, but at least you can learn that. But if you run off every weekend and go somewhere else, you're not even going to learn that. Most of the cultural knowledge is going to happen outside of the office, with the possible exception of the work you're doing out there in the flooded streets. But I mean, a lot of it's going to happen outside of the office, and take full advantage of that. I'm not saying don't take one side trip. I mean, if you're like 150 miles from some, fabulous, worldwide site, take advantage of it. But also try to be present in the place that you're going and learn as much as you can about that place. We're talking about cultural competency the other day. There's no such thing. I'm not completely competent. I've lived in the United States for, I won't tell you how many years, many, and I'm not completely competent in this culture. So you can't possibly develop competency in another culture during a summer internship. But the best that you can do is learn as much as you can and be humble and listen and recognize that, yes, I bring expertise, but I also bring curiosity.
I'm going to open the floor to question in just a moment. I'd like to ask about funding sources just for a moment to help, especially when people are just starting. Where might you start in thinking about that? If anyone could comment on that. And we have Bill Nolting here from the International Center, so many of you might know him.
Yeah, so Paula included a link to a funding sources document on our site. Right now it has the 2014 to 15 deadlines in it, but they're very close. It changes only a date or two a year. So you can take that as a starting point, and we will update that. That brings together the funding sources from all across the university, and most of those funding sources are open for graduate students as well.
So Bill's referring to a link I sent out in an email for those who had pre-registered. And so if you go on the website, on International Center's website, you will find that link that very clearly lists those links.
Like I said, I was at their open house today, and all of the area study centers have funding, and then the International Institute has general funding, and you can pair that up. I mean, it's not one or the other. You can get, you know, a few $1,000s from the area study center that is related to the place you're going. You can get some general funding from International Institute. Many of your colleges and schools have some funding for these kinds of things. There's a boatload of money out there. It's just a matter of finding it and also making certain that your proposal addresses the mission of that funding. The biggest mistake, I sit on a committee for one of the big funding programs, I won't name it, and last year there were 18 applicants and only 2 of them answered the question that the funder asked. You know, so it made it real easy to choose, you know, because you know, so that's a very important thing. I think that's one of the 3 top reasons that people aren't funded is that they don't address
They don't match the mission.
the mission of the pot of money.
Yeah, that's great advice.
If I could answer that too, because there's so many like sort of pots of money, so to speak, in Michigan, what worked for me in some ways, and you know, don't take this as 100% truth, but I would prefer to, rather than just applying for like one big lump sum from one source of one fellowship or scholarship, I would apply for a lot of smaller ones. And what I've found is that once you got one source of money or source of funding, the dominoes started to fall, right? Like if it works out where you can write future applications after you already have some source of funding, that's huge, is if you can already put down, yes, I've got this amount of funding and I need just this much more to cover the full bid.
Some people suggested too, in my conversation of finding students to speak on the panel, that be careful about funding sources too, because where they come from, there's certain expectations sometimes. So when you go with one large funding source, it might impact your internship. I don't know if any of you experienced that.
Well, it might impact your funding here too.
Okay.
Like the financial aid package and all this stuff.
Yes.
So,
That's important. I mean, we fund students at the School of Public Health. We funded 40 students this past summer. We don't release funds until May 1st because it's outside of the school year and it doesn't impact, you know, and most people should know that. I mean, we've talked about that. There's a Council on Global Engagement and we've had that conversation. So people shouldn't be releasing money during the academic year because that's when your financial aid applies.
Depending on if you're a master's or a PhD student. And Rackham is a funding source too, particularly if you pair research with what you're doing. So certainly Rackham has a link to our master's and our PhD funding sources on our website. And we have people here who can also talk with you about that.
Did you guys all generally find your funding before or after you had an internship secured? What was the process?
So the question is, did you find funding before or after internship?
Most funders need a proposal that says where you're going and what you're going to do. There are very few funders who just, oh, here's some money, go find something to do. There might be one out there, but not many.
well, the Museum Studies program actually tells you how much money you're getting if you find an internship, and you just go find it, and then yes, you apply after, but you already know.
So let me ask for those who might be newbies at it, thinking about how you time that. Like, you commit to an internship and you don't have funding yet. Like, how does that work? Can anyone speak to that? It's hard, probably, is the thing to say.
I could speak to it, but I don't want to do all the talking.
So one thing I did a little bit was I got a small financial guarantee from my internship, or the people in Jakarta. Basically, just so I would say, like, I'll come here if you guys can just, for instance, pay the flight, and I could, if worse comes to worse, cover everything else in pocket, right? Because the cost of living in a lot of these areas is not that great. And so that kind of, having that for sure internship, then I would apply for a lot more. So I would tend to, yeah, the first one's the critical one, but I would tend to apply for a few more after I got it, just so I could lessen, you know, any financial load on the local partners.
So a really good point to raise from that is asking for funding, if possible, from a site for something. that might be able, I mean, depends on where you're going, if they have any funding.
I would say that at the School of Public Health, the only students that aren't funded for international internships are the ones who don't write strong proposals, and that's usually a function of not being particularly certain that that's what they want to do. You have students who think, oh, you know, I should take advantage of this time to do something international. Yeah, you know, but they're not, their heart is not really in it. Like I said, we funded 40 students, 57 students had international internships, and I would be surprised if more than 2 or 3 more students, you know, wrote proposals. They got money from somewhere. However, I would say that if you're hoping to go to a place that's on a restricted or warning list, you should have a backup plan for a domestic internship. Because nobody's going to give you money, well, I shouldn't say nobody, I can't speak for everybody, but most people are going to give you money for a specific internship. And if conditions change in that country, so to the point where you can't go there, they're not necessarily going to let you shift that money to another place. So you would need to have a backup plan. And I've talked to students this year already who want to go to places that are on the warning list or on the restricted list. And the university's policy is that if you're a graduate student, you can still go to that place. But, you know, if conditions change, they can always pull the permission. And so that's, I can't speak to campus-wide, but I feel like people who are really committed to doing an international internship and apply to many sources of funding are typically able to get there.
Other questions? Right up here.
I was wondering for those people who sort of like blind email organizations that you don't know, especially given that a lot of these English is not their first language. How did you go about doing that process? Do you think it's useful if you have some language skills to try and like also draft the email in that language, even though it's not going to be nearly as good as your English language? I don't know if you have any suggestions.
So I had worked at an organization that had a lot of international bases before that, so I was thinking about going through them, saying, okay, I've worked in your New York office, you know, is there any way to place me in your Polish office or in, you know, somewhere in Eastern Europe? So in that case, it wasn't, I guess it wasn't blind emailing, but just see what connections you have so you don't, you know, you're not in a situation where you don't know if there's anyone in the office who speaks English, or like you don't know where you're sending this email to. That being said, unless you're like very sure in your language skills, I would always try English, just in case, you know, I'm always just nervous about writing the wrong thing in a language, but if you feel confident enough, I guess that's an option too.
If it's an international organization, I would go to their website first anyway and see if they have a formal internship process. Even if you have a particular country you want to go to, I would look at that first, because unless you have a personal contact that somebody gave you, or I have a friend who works there, or I know somebody there, then you're not going to get anywhere anyway just sending an email, because you don't even know who to send it to, and it probably won't get seen by anybody. But if it's a local organization, I defer to them.
Go for it.
Can you hear me? So what I did, well, I speak Romanian, but with that said, this university is huge and there's a whole bunch of international groups, right? There's a Romanian Student Association, there's all kinds of groups. So you just go to them, you know, contact somebody and say, because any culture you will go to, whether they speak English or not, they will definitely appreciate an email in their language. I can tell you that everybody at the institutions I worked at spoke English, but they would have preferred, you know, just to try, you know, and sometimes they'll reply to you in English. If they see that you're struggling, they'll reply to you in English. But
Right, I completely agree with that, that if you can't get by in the native language, even if you have to cobble together like a really rudimentary email with Google Translate's help, I think that, you know, it goes a fair ways. And the other thing then, if you're, you know, sending these emails cold, like expect a lot of time between your possible reply. Like not, you know, people in my experience in Indonesia are not, you know, checking their email 50 times a day, right? So it took like 3 weeks sometimes to hear back.
in my case, I think, United Nations or international organization, they have the international staff members also. I think they can understand English, so I didn't wrote the language for kind of each country, but I didn't write if I wanted, I was able to translate the English into Portuguese, but the reason why I didn't do that was, if they don't read the email in English, which means I cannot work there in English as well. So, and also like during the interview, because even if I worked with the international staff members in English, but I also worked with the Brazilian government officials. I think many of them didn't speak English, so even if we worked in English for kind of the meeting or for common things, I had to speak in Portuguese. So during the interview, my supervisor asked me if I can speak Portuguese. So I told her that no, but I'm not learning from today. So, but because I was able to speak Spanish, so I told them I can learn Portuguese from now on. So next 3 months. And then thankfully they sent me the Portuguese language school during my internship time, so that was helpful as well.
Also, just be honest about your language skills. For an internship, I sort of said, someone asked me if I spoke French, and I was like, I can read French, I can't really speak it, and that actually came up later, even though it's not my strongest language, and I had to do a translation, which I was able to do, but if I had, if I had completely lied, or never completely lied, but like, if my language skills were weaker, I wouldn't have been able to do that, and it would have come off as a little weird.
So one of the things I'm hearing, I just want to underline, is to be intentional. So you were being very intentional about the United Nations, thinking about the context of who you'd be speaking to in that setting and what you need to convey about that. And at a more grassroots level, it might be just demonstrating I'm very interested in the community, I'm interested in the culture and the language, so I'm going to give it an effort. And so there's different reasons why you might or might not write in the language, and then if you need translation, Luciana had pointed out that there's people on campus who can assist with that. So being in an internship search, you're trying to convey, I'm interested in your organization, I'm interested in people in your organization, and that's an intentional process around language. So.
Yeah, in our application process, we require a letter of invitation from the organization, and it can be either an email or it can be a attachment on letterhead. And they're often sent in another language. And the student who's doing that internship, they can't submit it to me in Bulgarian. I can't read that. So, to some extent, they need to figure out how to get that translated and whether they can do it or if they have a friend who can do it. But the question is, ask yourself, can I function there if my skills are not better? And it's one thing to say that, yeah, there are a couple people in the office who speak English, but you got to shop. You got to get on the bus. You got to get around. So just be honest with yourself how comfortable you're going to be in another place if you don't have the language at all, if you have a little bit of the language, whatever,
Well, I'm interested too that you all said this commitment to wanting to learn the language makes a difference too. So a commitment to, I'm very interested in this, the work that's done here, I'm interested in this culture, I'm interested in this community is conveyed on a variety of levels. So saying I don't have beyond written mastery, but I do write conveys a certain level of interest.
Another question about the cold medium. Does it come off as too forward, or is it a bad idea to attach your resume or CV with these notes?
I do.
I think it actually shows them that you don't want them to waste your time, waste their time, right? So yeah, you got all the information in that email if you're interested in any content.
And then is it a good idea to have maybe like a version in English and then a version in the language of send both?
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of that's a great question. That's a standard internship question when you're sort of trolling. Do I include things about myself that aren't requested? And so the reason I'm saying that is that there are resources on campus that can help you with the international internship, and there are resources on campus that can just help you with a job search, which this is, a particular job search, so that you can think about how that works. So you don't always have to go to an international source for some of the questions.
That actually raises a question for me, though, because in the School of Public Health, we get a number of visiting scholars from around the world, and their CVs often tell their marital status.
Yeah, they're very different CVs.
And, I mean, should our students be adding that when they're going to those countries? It's really interesting.
You know, I've worked at the Career Center for many years, and I'm looking at you, Bill. I don't know if you look like you might have something to say around that or no. Because it is interesting that we do have strong cultural differences in how we convey ourselves on CVs, and even we call them CVs internationally, we call them resumes or CVs here. So I think it's worth doing some asking around about that to see what's appropriate. It would be odd to get an American for a United States-based job for us to see married, 3 children, you know, that sort of thing, but that's very common internationally. So, and information so accessible internationally, you can look around to see, again, you're trying to enter culture, what's appropriate.
I sent mine in a Europass format, which is the European Union kind of, you know, custom.
I think, depending on where you're applying, if it's a fairly well-known organization, they've likely received cold emails and cold applications in the past, right? So it's not going to suddenly be like, oh, like, there's no marital status on this resume, like, it's a no-go. So I think that for the most part, they should be pretty used to a cold email.
Bill, you think you were going to say something?
Just going to say that there are 2 web resources which the university library subscribes to. So Michigan students can access these free. One is called Going Global, the other is called My World Abroad. And both of those have sample resumes and a lot of additional tips. You can find easy links to them from the International Career Pathways website, which is on the International Center site.
And Going Global is a fabulous site. If you haven't looked at that and you're thinking about an international experience, that's really great. And going through those portals, if I'm correct, Bill, gives you access to things that if you went on your own and just search for Going Global without going through the university, you wouldn't have access to. So looking at the library system gives you access sometimes to university subscriptions that we have.
If you're applying to many different internships and you don't know yet, you know, which ones you're going to be accepted in, how would you go about applying for funding in that kind of case? Like, would you explain, like, you know, the different internships you're considering when you're applying for funding, so that we know what we want to do? But that's kind of uncertain too, so
So I'm going to answer that because I know this is a public health student, and my answer is probably going to be quite relevant. So the things that are required include a proposal which says what you're doing and an invitation letter which says, we know this person is coming here to do such and such a thing between these dates and will be supervised by so-and-so. So it's very difficult to apply for funding from us and probably most other places if you don't have at least that. Now, having said that, we all understand that things change, and especially in international health and development, you know, we're asking somebody to tell me what they're going to be doing next summer, and they don't know what their funding is going to be, they don't know what their staffing level. So things change, and students often end up doing a different project, and that's okay. That's actually part of the learning experience that, you know, in global health, stuff changes, okay? But you have to have at least that basic thing. Now, from my perspective, if you haven't gotten something pinned down by the first day of school in the winter semester, it might be too late because most of the funding deadlines are late January to mid-February, with a few exceptions, a few later ones. So if you haven't gotten something pinned down by, you know, the very beginning of the winter semester, it's not going to be impossible, but it's going to be difficult to get all the pieces together. As he mentioned, you know, the people don't respond to emails as quickly, you know, so getting that letter of invitation could take a couple of weeks. So this is not too soon to be trying to pin that down. Now, you can pursue a couple of different things, and whichever one responds more quickly and gets you the information you need, then you just go with that one.
Another part to that question, maybe more broadly too, is thinking about how much you convey your undecidedness about what you want to do. And this is more of an internship thing. So I always say, my buzz phrase is, authenticity doesn't require full disclosure. And so the reason I say that is you might be talking to multiple people about multiple things, but when you're talking to that person, to focus on the thing that you're talking about to them that's relevant to them. And you might have all this, like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, who knows, this might not be the thing I want. That conversation doesn't need to be, that sort of indecisiveness conveyed in an application anyway, like, I would be willing to do anything, means that you don't have a focus. And so within the context of this role, within this context of this funding, this is where my interests lie. The rest needs to stay out of the application.
And you can put in a couple of possibilities too. You can say, you know, in conversation with the agency, these 3 projects are possible projects I could work on, and then go into a little detail about each of them.
Yeah, multiple interests are very appropriate, and I think that conveying that you're in the you're in a learning stage. People understand that. That's why you're interested in internship. It's the ability to commit to something, even though, and I always say commit to it because you know this isn't forever. You're committing to the next step. What other sorts of questions people have? I'm going to ask, while you're thinking about that, I'm going to ask our group if there's anything that you would say, absolutely don't do this. This is a lesson learned. If I had to go back, I would not have done this, or I absolutely would do this. You know, what sort of things rise to the top for you, if anything?
Start it out. One thing that I think kind of streamlines the funding process a lot is if you sit down with generally 3 people you're going to have writing letters of recommendations for these grants you're applying for. I think everyone I've applied to had 3 people needed for a letter of recommendation, which I think is, in general, in grad school, fairly standard. But even if you just sit down for 15 minutes with like a professor or anyone who you've traveled internationally with, you know, in an academic setting, having those 3 letters of recommendation are not only ready to go, but also then being fully aware, not only like what you've done at Michigan, but what you hope to do internationally, I think allows for a stronger letter of recommendation and in turn, a better chance of funding.
So I think during the internship, I think I was very exhausted right after I finished the semester. So after I finish work around 5, 6 p.m., I usually get back to my hotel and spend my time. But if I go back to Brazil, I probably mingle with more local people, especially in Brasilia. I think that this is the government city, so many of the government officials live there, and there are great opportunities to hang out with them. So if I go back there, maybe meet more local people and spend more time with them.
I wanted to say that I think the best thing that I was grateful for was to be honest with myself of what kind of organization I wanted to work with. I always imagine larger institutions or larger NGOs as being these places where I would work with one person or maybe a small team, but the decisions and everything behind the scenes happen somewhere else. So I wanted to work with smaller organizations that potentially I could sit at the table where the decisions were being made and actually see the process through which people made these decisions. And it turned out that I worked for projects that were sponsored by the USAID, and then all these larger NGO partnerships that I never thought I would work for, but in the end I did because I was working with a small institution. So I got a chance to see both. From just being willing to work with small organizations with 3 people who had no clue how to write grant proposals, which I helped with, you know. So in a way, it kind of grew because I was there, and I feel so grateful for it, you know. So.
I have one. So I guess I would say again is to get involved with a group, maybe not formally. Maybe informally as a small group of peers who you found that kind of share your passion for this type of work. Because I think going through the process not alone will help answer questions that you may have. Everyone's got, I'm sure, a lot of the same questions, so working through that process together really help out each other. And in terms of getting involved in a student organization, I know that may seem more maybe not, I don't know, I went to a small school so we didn't have graduate students, but that seems a lot very undergraduate to me, I think in some cases, but when I joined the one that was responsible for getting me involved in this project, it really opened up the doors for a lot of things. So I can't speak for applying, blindly on a UN website or the World Health Organization website, but I do know that, like we've talked about, Michigan has people essentially everywhere. So using the connections that we have here first and trying to then strategically get your way into an application where I think get your name at the top of the pile.
I think something for when you actually get to a foreign country, just be honest with yourself about how much you can take on. You're going to have some sort of culture shock, especially if this is your first time abroad. I was actually completely alone. I didn't travel with a group. And what I found helped was like reaching out to my supervisor saying, she was an expat from Canada, so I said, you've been through this, can you give me some tips about different places to look for like English speaking populations or like just international populations in general where I'll feel more comfortable, tips about traveling within the country. And she was very nice and helped, and they'll understand you're an American coming in and a lot of this is going to be new for you.
I would say in my many years of working in international health, the one thing that I wish students would maybe do differently is focus more on what they can learn than where they want to end up. You'll have a student who's never been anywhere who wants to go this particular organization, this particular country, because that's where they want to end up. And it's like, go somewhere where you can learn something to take there. In other words, I don't think there's anything wrong about choosing a country or choosing a region. That's not my point, but being so focused on something so specific, it's like, I want my dream job in an internship. If you got your dream job, would you really be able to do it yet? Probably not. Go learn something that you can take to your dream job. So that's, and I hope that didn't sound too harsh, but I just see that a lot.
No, that's wonderful. I mean, I've heard a lot of things that sort of tie this together. And one thing I want to bring out is that you learn at an institution, and I know as a graduate student, particularly working at Rackham, you get so department focused. And when you're seeking an international experience, you're at a wonderful institution for that because of the types of organizations we have here, the types of people we have here, both graduate and undergraduate resources that are sometimes appear to be only for undergraduates, but actually have resources for graduate students in that as well. So if you can think beyond what I've heard everyone say, think beyond the context of what you're in, more broadly to the institution you're at and the alumni who are connected with that, you open up a whole world for yourself. And Rackham is certainly one of those places, so we're happy to host that here. State your interests, say them out loud. They're going to change someday, but you'll never sharpen them if you're always keeping it close to you because you're afraid that you're going to sound naive or not sure. Put them out there, and I think for graduate students it's a hard thing because you tend to be precise. We tend to want to say what we know, and sometimes when we don't know, we don't say it. And I think saying it enables you to shape it, get people to respond to it. Start early, apply to things as much as you can, and look for resources in a variety of areas. There are people who can help you do that, but you also, the internet is a very effective way of doing that as well. And immerse yourself, it sounds like. Immerse yourself in the culture. So you're going to do that certainly if you go to a different culture, but there are ways to immerse yourself here as well. There are organizations, groups, events. So start acting, walking, talking like the person who wants to do that, and and then things will start to present themselves to you. I promised that we would spend the first hour talking about this and then wrap up and let you ask questions individually to people, but I want to allow some of the people, if there's anything, Bill, that you feel like you want to say as a wrap-up, or things to pre-advertise. We have things coming up still on the ICP.
Well, just in terms of funding, there is a funding workshop on October 7th.
So October 7th, the funding workshop.
And that features all the area study centers that the students have been talking about over at the International Institute, as well as additional funding resources.
So we're glad that we're before that workshop, so you can still attend the funding workshop that's coming up, as well as other resources on site. If there's anything that you heard here that you want to know more about, you can always email me directly, Paula Wishart, and I'll get you to the right resource, or any of the representatives too who are here. Thank you for coming. thank you for considering this. It's really what you should be doing as a graduate student to broaden your training, so we appreciate that. And I'll invite our speaker to say, I know Janir has to catch your eye.
I just wanted to plug one other thing. You know, several people on the panel talked about the importance of language. And sometimes, you know, you're in graduate school and you haven't studied a language yet. We're actually, as part of the International Career Pathways month and a half of activities, there's a program on the 27th, I think it's from 5 to 7 or it might be 6 to 8 at Palmer Commons on language, and it actually offers ways to get a language, you know, like if you're already a graduate student, you haven't had a chance to study. So if you have time that night, it's on the poster. Come to that, and there'll be a lot of suggestions about how you can pick up another language to prepare for your internship, to prepare for your career, whatever.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much. I want to thank our panelists too. I really appreciated your insights and your openness to sharing them with everyone. Thank you very much.